The bench-mounted Model 50 frame and wheels provided a solid hook to hang our new metalwork on, or to be grammatically correct, a hook on which to hang our new metalwork. As you're still blissfully innocent of the petrol tank's condition, let's keep it that way for now. Procrastinate and reverse engineer the rolling chassis of this middleweight Panther, stripping down to nuts and bolts and component parts. Vital to the process of assessment of condition, with notes which these videos and still photos will provide, are marked and nested kitchen spread tubs as a reminder for ordering new fixings and small parts. My memory can no longer be considered a reliable witness. Exposed threads have been doused with copious quantities of penetrating fluid. The spanners are warmed up, so let's go. Wiring remnants first. And don't be tempted to bin anything yet. You'll discover precisely what information you need only when you haven't got it. The headlamp shell is held between fork top shrouds by 2 bolts with captive threads in the shell. Switch and speedometer have already been removed for their own safety. All we can see of the ammeter is a scab inside. Threads on the right-hand captive nut have given up, and a longer bolt and nut are fitted. Removal releases a tax disc from 1989, which confirms what we already know of the Model 50's history. It would have been interesting to find previous year's discs underneath. A rubber washer, not on the P&M spares list, has stuck to the shell and shroud. A plug of glass fibre with a filler topping replaces the ammeter, and probably gave as much information on charge rate as the original instrument did after a few hundred miles. Some basic hackery with an old chisel and a hole saw, and we set the shell aside for the grand paint stripping session which will follow. The Villiers Company's strength was the production of single-cylinder power units and twins like the Model 50's 325cc 3T. These were complete in themselves, and a manufacturer had only to add frame, wheels, tank and seat. Attachment points are the exhaust pipes, final drive chain, speedometer cable, the wiring which we have already removed, carburettor controls and assorted studs to the frame plates. A wire brush turns up the final drive chain's spring clip, and don't ditch the chain even if you know its size. An old one may be just the thing to complete your artistic flight of fancy. Exhaust pipes, 2 of, require a minimum of 3 hands for removal. I suspect that the many over-length bolts and studs found here didn't originate in Cleckheaton. Perhaps the previous owner had a cheap supplier of fastenings in multiples of 1 inch, and a hacksaw with a broken blade. Excess rusty thread beyond the nuts can confound dismantling, even after multiple applications of plus gas. This C-spanner suits the big Panther's exhaust nuts, but I have a smaller one somewhere. Ah, the speedo cable comes off the 3T's semi-unit gearbox, and the throttle cable disconnects from the bars. Keep that penetrating oil flowing. Sometimes when I put these videos together, I wonder if I'm doing you a disservice by slicing and dicing them to give the impression of a workflow utterly devoid of glitches, gumption traps, or language that you wouldn't use in front of your mum. But you know, don't you, that a bolt can resist until its hexagon becomes a circle, no matter how well the spanner fits. If my wall clock had been visible, you would know precisely what it took to shift the nut on this front stud. It's impossible to drift it free because the rubber bush's inner sleeve absorbs engine vibrations or hammer blows with equal efficiency. Clear some bench space and psych yourself up for the next bit. It's easy to nip fingers, so I don welding gloves and try to lift with arms and legs rather than a bent back at this slightly awkward angle. And if this makes your eyeballs bulge, wait till you have to lift Panther's big un. Have you had your breakfast porridge? Drain gearbox and primary chain case to avoid a mess later. The gearbox plug is rounded off and seized in the case, calling for an impact driver and an undersize socket to shift it. Inspect for a stripped thread. At least there is oil inside, even if it's a little treacly. The primary case plug is a slotted screw, also with a fibre washer. So back at the remains on the bike bench for a check of front wheel offset, which I saw was wrong when fitting the front mudguard brackets. The 18-inch rims on Panther's 8-inch hubs should be centrally disposed, and these are 3/16 of an inch offset to the left, showing a 3/8 of an inch difference between the two measurements. Since there are no spacers on the hubs, they only fit one way, suggesting a fault in the wheel build, which we can rectify later. Pinch bolts nip the spindle in the fork, one each side. Slacken them and use a socket on the spindle with a big open-end spanner opposite. One sleeve nut comes off, the other side pinned to the spindle. It's a touch tight in the bearings, but a drift carefully applied at the centre so as not to damage threads persuades it out. Rolling the wheel back frees the left hand cover and the wheel shifts over to disengage the brake fulcrum block on the right leg. Coil and store the brake cable, another pattern piece. With seesaw weight at the back end, this is a good moment to tackle the forks, a frankly cheapskate version of those on the Panther slopers. Forged yokes were replaced with these, fabricated from flat plates and welded on tubes, split with pinch bolts to grip the stanchions. Now there's a fine demonstration of what psychologists call displacement activity. I wave a spanner in desultory fashion at those pinch bolts. They shrug it off, and I turn my attention quickly to the handlebars. The aluminium alloy top yoke is a decoy, a cover-up with no function other than to divert attention from the embarrassment of those steel plate yokes. Fork top nuts and those securing the chunky handlebar clamp set it free. There's no steering damper on this middleweight Panther. Some of the original red paint is revealed here. Ah, the tank. No, I won't bother you with the condition of it yet. That would be mean. The upper yoke is snug on the top of the stanchions, but a few bumps with a plastic mallet get it moving. Go easy and you can support the forks with one hand, tap and catch it with the bench. Put the mallet down and you may be in time to stop the bearing balls going off into the landscape. Never mind, we'll probably replace them anyway. At least they're well greased and don't roll too far. The inner rear guard is held by a stud across its front bracket and shares bolts with seat bracket and frame in a sandwich at the rear. It's been remodelled by a rear end shunt and has more holes than a colander. Put it on the list for repairs. The Model 50's complex footrest assembly is held by a super long stud at the front and a shorter one at the rear. This one has rust on threads, so over length that I can't even attach a socket fully to the half-inch drive until I've undone by several turns. When both ends of a fixing aren't accessible simultaneously by one individual, there are ways to overcome the problem. Bolting seats into a kit car some years ago, I had cause to explore the subject more fully. Yes, I have an occasional assistant, but she's not keen on what she calls the wrong kind of dirt, i.e. that found in a shed rather than a garden, and requests to crawl under motor cars are not favourably received. When complete, I presented my car proudly for MOT inspection. The tester's voice came clearly from beneath his hydraulic ramp. Does this pair of mole grips perform an important function? I'm not sure I have the correct blueprint for this complex footrest assembly. A serrated spacer at the midpoint extends the left rest beyond the primary drive case. Between the engine plate and the right hand tubular bracket, which supports front and rear rests, are two plain spacers, one on each stud. But that doesn't agree with a picture of his Model 50 sent by our Facebook group admin, Graham. On his bike, plain and serrated spacers all appear to be disposed to the left. The spares list from the Panther Owners Club library gives sizes but no note of position. Fortunately, stud lengths are provided, so we should be able to replace those with the correct lengths. Whichever machine you are working on, be sure to connect with the appropriate Owners Club. Anything less is working with one hand tied behind your back. The chain guard shares a bolt with the lower fixing for the Armstrong suspension unit. The nut comes free, but the bolt is seized in the lower bush sleeve. A second stud on the swinging arm releases the guard. Digger's Model 50, seen on the drowned rat run on this channel, also has a lower guard, though my P&M spares list offers a single item at £1, 18 shillings and sixpence. Two big nuts on the rear wheel spindle set that free. We may as well complete this now. Best place to deal with the lower suspension bolts will be on the bench. One last stud separates the rear frame, and we can turn the rest on its side and remove the stand, which sits on shouldered bushes with hexagons for a spanner. It's all nice and oily and free here. Not so the lower suspension bolts. More release agent on those, but we're chasing our tail because the bolts and sleeves are turning with the rubber bushes. I trial a non-destructive method, attacking with a G-clamp while the carpenter isn't looking, but in the end I abandon all pretence of engineering finesse and grab my hacksaw. Trick is to run the blade into the gap either side and sever the bolt without cutting the bracket or the suspension unit's eye. Now the remains of bush and rusted-in bolt can be pressed out with a couple of well-chosen sockets. These bushes are at end of life anyway, so will need replacing. Another test of agility involving hands and knees, but thankfully no bumps-a-daisy. This is my homebrewed device for compressing suspension units. The plastic protector is a filleted spray can lid. Between you and me, I think the fulcrum bolt is set into the wrong hole here. I told you. Talk among yourselves while I wangle free the aluminium alloy collets and withdraw the springs. These are rusty, but otherwise reusable. No signs of fluid leakage, but we'll check damping later. Slotted screws in the handlebar clamp are well chewed, but they move with an impact driver. While we're at the vise, let's attack those forks. It seems that the rusted nuts are so close in that neither ring spanner or socket will fit. An open ender just rounds them off, but a screwdriver jammed into the back locks them. Bracket on the right is a brake cable support. Thick paint on the lower shroud obscures fixings, but yes, the shrouds really are welded to the yoke. Further signs of cost cutting. There's no chance that such rusty stanchions will slide through the yoke. A strip of abrasive cloth improves the fit. Bung a screwdriver into the gap and off it comes. Nut 2 spits the driver out, and put on the other way jams, but the nut still resists. Time to resort to some sacrificial dismantling. A nut and bolt is easy and cheap to replace. Gloves while hammering in a confined space might just prevent an injury. But if you're careless enough to break a bone, be sure to see the funny side. The forks are 60 years old, so we'll replace stanchions, bushes and seals as a matter of course. A peg spanner undoes them, but these are both finger tight. Assume there will be oil inside or suffer the consequences. Rubber bump stops are reusable. Which effort results in a rather unpromising heap of metal, but don't despair. In the next thrilling session we'll apply ourselves to paint stripping and repairs and turn the process around at last.